Today we are ranking the newest albums from classic melodic death metal bands. And we're starting with Carcass and Torn Arteries. Alright, 2021. Surgical Steel was fantastic. But if you ask me, this is the more interesting album overall. The fan base was incredibly divided on this one, but with tracks like Dance of Ixtab, The Devil Rides Out, and Kelly's Meat Emporium, it was an easy pick for one of my favorite albums of 2021. And there's a pretty impressive cross-section here of all of their styles from over the years. Death grind, progressive, melodic death metal, and even some fun death and roll. I knew I was going to enjoy this album, but I had no idea that I wasn't going to be able to put it down. So this one's going strong start at perfection. Next up, one of the newer albums on this list, In Flames with Foregone, 2023. As I said in my discography tier list, I was pretty stoked for this album for the first time in over a decade, given how good the singles were. State of Slow Decay, Meet Your Maker, and The Great Deceiver especially seem to be calling back to the days of Soundtrack to Your Escape and Come Clarity. Fantastic guitar work, too, across the board with Chris Broderick of Jag Panzer and Megadeth fame stepping into the fold. So the instrumentation is great, but unfortunately, Anders brings a bunch of this down with some of the cheesier, clean singing, which has just been a plague on their later discography.
Stop it. Get some help.
They could have easily knocked this out of the park, and I hope they do next time, but as it stands, I'd just call it good, maybe just short of great. Alright, Amorphis with Halo 2022. Honestly, this latest era of Amorphis albums has been my favorite for the band, and that trend continued with Halo. Each track is like a beautiful, windswept Finnish landscape backed by a soundtrack that is equal parts folk metal, melodic death metal, and progressive metal. Both the harsh and clean vocals are top-notch, and so many earworm hooks from both the synth and guitar on bangers like On the Dark Waters, When the Gods Came, and A New Land. Also love the little inclusions of sitar that pop up here and there. I'm putting this one at fantastic. Then we have Soilwork with Övergivenheten in 2022. Now, the title track on here is one of the most infectious chorus hooks of their entire career, and then Nous sommes la guerre, or We Are War, is a full-on 7-minute prog opus that only seems to get better with each listen. Tracks like Is It In Your Darkness and Vultures have such an incredibly dense atmosphere that just sweeps you away to another place, the latter also incorporating a nice bluesy, head-bobbing groove further in. Golgotha is amongst the heavier tracks with its raging drums and tremolo lines, and also Harvest Spine with both chugging verses and soaring choruses. Nice dynamics too, with the incorporation of piano and strings. But all said and done, I'd say this is an impressive album with a lot going for it, but it doesn't quite live up to the promise of their best progressive-leaning works like The Living Infinite, and I don't find it to be as re-listenable as some of the others here. It's also one of the least death metal, for sure. So yeah, this one's going to great, could almost make fantastic, but not quite. Dark Tranquillity with Moment 2020.
When stages were time, when lies in it wait, the never-names touch.
Dark Tranquillity is one of my favorite bands, and with one of my favorite discographies of all time. I loved Atoma, but this one just didn't really hit the same for me. And it's weird because it's far from a bad album. Like, all of these songs are honestly quite good. Phantom Days has a really awesome synth line that reminds me of something off of Fiction or Damage Done. Identical to None has a super infectious growl-along chorus. Great dark, moody vibes on Ego Deception and a drawn-out exit. I just feel like it's missing something that I still can't quite put my finger on. Like, the same soul just isn't quite there. It's like what I've heard before, but kind of hollow feeling. Maybe it just has something subtle to do with the production. I'm sure these tracks sound fantastic live. As it stands, I'm kind of splitting the difference with this one. I'm also putting it at great, maybe just a little bit higher than Soilwork. Next up, Nightrage with Abyss Rising 2022. This band is a mix of Greek and Swedish melodic death metal formed all the way back in 2000, but has always kind of lingered in the shadows of bigger names. And it's a shame because they put out some top-notch material, with Abyss Rising being another overlooked, rock-solid release paying tribute to all of the best elements of the genre. It's not particularly flashy, but if you came up on 2000s releases from the likes of Dark Tranquillity, Soilwork, and In Flames, this takes me right back to those simpler times in a big way. A very tight 39-minute runtime too, brimming with hooks for bangers like Nauseating Oblivion, Abyss Rising, and Falsifying Life. Not a single dud, really, so this one moved up to fantastic. Then we have Moore's Principium Est with 7, 2021. One of my favorite and also most underrated of the Finnish melodic death metal bands, and as much as I love The Unborn and Liberation Equals Termination, this album may actually be their best so far. The symphonic elements are more triumphant than ever, and the guitar work is absolutely insane. And again, not a single dud here among these tracks, but my personal favorites are probably Lost in a Starless Aeon and In Frozen Fields. For the 100th time, it's criminal that these guys don't get as much credit as their peers, so if you haven't checked them out, please do, and just tell everyone you know. Spread the word. Going to perfection. Alright, a rare hop over to America here with the Black Dahlia Murder and Verminous in 2020. Rest in peace once more to one of the finest frontmen to ever walk the stage, and this was Trevor's final full length with the band. The Black Dahlia Murder have never released an album I didn't enjoy, and really this is no exception. Great opener with the title track, followed up quickly with Godlessly, and my personal favorite, Removal of the Oaken Stake, with its incredibly infectious drumming and guitar work. Almost like a blackened thrash vibe to that one. Love the death clocky harmonized leads on Child of Night and the shredding solos on the somewhat mournful sounding Sunless Empire, which may be among the best solos of their career. That said, I wouldn't call it one of their best albums overall, and there are plenty of others on here I would choose over it, so I'm going to put this one at great tier. Bellacore with Coherence 2021. Now, I love this Australian band, and Vessels was one of my favorite albums of 2016, but I was really disappointed with this follow-up. Hidden Window had me pretty hyped leading up to its release, but ultimately I find a lot of this runtime to be honestly pretty boring. It's just lacking the same hook-heavy qualities of their previous outings. It's a little bit kind of almost doomier. Foothold, Valence, and Much More Was Lost are also pretty solid, but overall I just find this to be a bit of a chore to get through. Hopefully they can rally for the next one. It's going to okay tier. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button and comment your own rankings down below. But we're moving on to The Haunted with Strength in Numbers in 2017. Now, this album was actually a lot better than I remembered. Brute Force is an absolute banger, still bringing the energy of classics like One Kill Wonder and The Haunted Made Me Do It. Spark is great, and Preachers of Death has a pretty epic neoclassical solo. Marco is consistently aggressive, especially on Tighten the Noose and the Meshuggah-esque Means to an End, and it's impossible to not scream along to the chorus of the title track. I've always liked how these guys fuse Gothenburg melodeath riffs with bluesier, Pantera-esque elements. I had this one pretty low initially from memory, but the more I re-listened to it, the faster it rose into the ranks, and it ended up towards the bottom of fantastic. Kalmah with Palo, 2018. Even after over 25 years, these Finnish underdogs are absolutely killing it with their swamp-infused brand of melodeath. Brimming with vitality and killer riffs, this album continues along the same trajectory as 2013's epic 7th Swampphony. The folky neoclassical hooks are larger than life, and when backed by the massive-sounding synth work, I hear the culmination of various other Finnish metal artists' sounds from like Insomnium and Moore's Principium Est to Ensiferum, who by the way I didn't include because I consider them more of a folk metal band. Tracks like Blood Ran Cold and The World of Rage are impossible tier try not to move challenges. The guitars and drums are beyond infectious, and somehow Pekka's death metal snarls only seem to get stronger and stronger with each album. This one is also going to perfection. On the flip side, we have Amon Amarth with the Great Heathen Army in 2022. Now, I did enjoy this a bit more than the last two albums, but even as someone who loves most of them through Deceiver of the Gods even, the shtick is just starting to feel kind of tired. Get in the Ring is like a really bad WWE walkout song. And others like Hydron should be fun, but largely feel like generic and uninspired versions of ideas that they and others in the genre have just already done so much better. On the upside, Odin Owns You All gets me banging my head, Find a Way or Make One has solid atmosphere, and great call and respond vocal sections. Dawn of the Norsemen and Skoggle Rides With Me have some very triumphant driving melodies and harmonized soloing. And oddly enough, Saxons and Vikings is a really fun collab that seems so obvious in retrospect. It's not a terrible album, but it's easily one of the worst on this list, so it's going down to okay. Next up is Hypocrisy with Worship in 2021. Definitely one of the more aggressive albums on this list, with the opening title track even channeling some Slaughter of the Soul era At the Gates, as well as some groovy, almost Meshuggah-esque moments on Dead World, but then also delivering slower head bobbers like the hypnotic Chemical Horror and Greedy Bastards. Great stuff to bang your head to, but lacking in some of the more interesting and memorable qualities of some of the other albums on this list, and I've always found these vocals to be kind of one note. So for me personally, it's going to good. Omnium Gatherum with Origin in 2021. Another one of the more underrated and less discussed Finnish melodic death metal bands, but one that Chris loves to champion in his written reviews at metaltrenches.com, going so far as to give this album a 9. I'd classify it as somewhere between Insomnium and Amorphis, building massive atmosphere with more uplifting earworm guitar melodies and lush synth work offset by a more gruff vocal performance. There are faster shredders with wailing solos like Friction, but also slower moments like Fortitude, conjuring a bit of Swallow the Sun. And while there are some pretty powerful moments of singing, as with the soaring Paragon, there's far more emphasis on growls over the majority of the duration, if that's your thing. Even without the cleans though, tracks like Reckoning still put you on top of the clouds, kind of overseeing everything. Entrancing, but also quite heavy when it wants to be. I'm putting this one at great. Alright, Children of Bodom, Hexed, 2019. Another sad swan song here, this time for the final full length of Alexi Laiho. I saw some hardcore defenders of this album in the comments of my Children of Bodom tier list saying that this felt kind of like a return to form for them, but to me, everything just feels a little bit half-baked. It's not nearly as grand sounding with the keys pulled back and an overall kind of flat production. Of course, the solos are still there, but it's just not in the name of songs that already stand strong without them. I like Under Grass and Clover, which is one of the few tracks that actually stands out with its more upbeat, kind of equilibrium sounding melodies. Kick in the Spleen also has its moments, and Hexed has some fun neoclassical sounding elements. Perfectly fine, but hard to compete on this list. I'm putting it at okay. By the way, I'm realizing I probably could have included Equilibrium on this list from Germany, but they're also a little bit more kind of folk metal, symphonic metal, so I guess we'll do okay without them. Check them out if you haven't. But let's move on to Insomnium with Anno 1696, 2023. Insomnium's impeccable track record continues while also bringing some unique surprises along the way. When Sakis Tolis' Rotting Christ feature is the least interesting track on your album, you're in for a ride. But the feature that steals the show for me is on Godforsaken, with its lush layers of distortion, acoustic, sitar, and female vocals. Meanwhile, Lillian and the Witch Hunter continue to step up the band's usual expert harnessing of both light and dark. Great backing chorals on Starless Paths and Anno 1696, and the Rapids make for some of their most explosive, cathartic intros and concluding tracks, respectively. Really solid album, can't wait to tell you more about it in my full Insomnium tier list. Check out the pinned comment below, but also for my playlist of melodic death metal rankings. But yeah, this one's going to fantastic. Shoot, I realized I was actually supposed to put Soilwork at the top of good, so make that quick adjustment. Also, while I was editing, I realized I almost forgot Arch Enemy with Deceivers in 2022.
Welcome to the game. And after all is said and done,
This was another one of those bands I loved growing up, with albums like Wages of Sin, but felt like they had really fallen off in recent years. Fortunately though, I'd go so far as to say that this is definitely the best Elisa era album, with her really finding her own unique voice to stand apart from Angela. Handshake with Hell's an incredible opener, embracing some very fun power metal elements. House of Mirrors opens with another throwback 80s heavy metal scream alongside some very era appropriate riffing. Deceiver is more in line with their classic thrash inspired melody melodeath sound with guitars and riffs that go as hard and fast as ever. The Watcher mixes skanky thrash verses with a folky swing on the choruses. Sunset Over the Empire is another very classic sounding track that sounds like it could have been on Wages of Sin. It's not a perfect album given the tough competition here, but I feel pretty good putting it at the top of great tier, actually. But now we have At the Gates with the Nightmare of Being in 2021. Now, as I've said before, I wasn't the biggest fan of the post-reunion albums from At the Gates, and especially after To Drink from the Night itself, I had pretty low expectations going into this album. And it was yet another highly divisive release that year that fans seem to either hate or love, with me falling at the latter end of the spectrum. I did not anticipate the band known for the raging slaughter of the soul to go full prog on tracks like Cosmic Pessimism and Garden of Cyrus, complete with saxophone, I might add. Not to mention some more grand symphonic elements on Touched by the White Hands of Death and The Fall into Time. There's still straight bangers like The Paradox and The Abstract Enthroned, but it's really the new ground that they cover here that keeps me coming back. So this one is also going to perfection. Y'all, again, check out this playlist for more melodic death metal rankings, and again, let me know down in the comments how would you rank these differently. Let's have a conversation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.